So you were just saying about the separating of the open-ended questions. So would you read through them to find general themes, or would you pick what you were looking for to categorize them? Because I'm not fully getting that.
Well, it depends. So there are even within qualitative analysis where you're doing. There are different ways of coding qualitative data, and most qualitative researchers actually use a combination of methods. They don't just use one. So one is pre-existing concepts from the literature, where some of the things that you list that you're looking for are things that you sort of know that you're going to find because much of the body of literature has already supported that this is a consistent thing, right? So you can already sort of like bank on that you're going to have some of these categories. So you can put those as pre-existing. And then there are some that are going to come specifically from your data. And those are going to be through reading and rereading and figuring out like what are some patterns that are emerging and what seems to be, what are some salient things that are coming out, and how can I connect this to how I'm thinking about it, how the literature is saying it, and then what I'm hearing from whoever I'm talking to. There are some researchers who do what we would call more of a quantitative analysis of their qualitative data, whereby they don't mix, they don't do pre-existing and open-ended, they really just rely on pre-existing. And or sometimes they make it up from the data and then they only code with a limited number of categories and everything else is listed as other, which is something that we did in the immigration project. So we had data on close to 400 kids, and it would have been really difficult to do detailed, rich qualitative analysis on all those. So what we would end up with was these coding schemes that might have like 6 categories of what kind of music do you like to listen to? And so we would have 6 possibilities. If the kid named a 7th one, it just was other. Because we just can't, like, okay, fine, we just live with the fact that we don't know what your techno, like band beat from whatever. Okay, fine, like we lost that one. But we know that like 38% of kids listen to hip hop. That's fine. Those are decisions that we're willing to live with. So it depends on, there are different choices that people make with even how to analyze open-ended questions.
From a practical perspective of actually collecting data, survey data, your participants are allowed to skip questions, right? That's part of the process of when they agree to participate. They're allowed to skip questions, and the questions that you can think about yourself if you're doing a survey. What are the questions you most likely skip?
The long ones.
The long ones that are written answers and that are too personal, right? What's your income? Prefer not to answer. So I remind my students to think of that. So you make decisions like Fabi was just saying about your surveys or whatever data you're trying to collect. There's a dance between rich qualitative description and quantitative description that doesn't get at some of the things you may be more interested in, but you're more likely to get the quantitative data because it's easier for people to answer if it just has, if you ask me a question and I can pick A, B, C, or D. I can do that much easier. If you want me to write 100 words on why whatever, I'm going to skip that. So think about, there is this dance that you're going to have to do as you are collecting data, because just because you have a survey doesn't mean everybody's going to answer every question. And that's just the reality, that's the constraint of collecting data, so for my students, we do, because I also don't pay people I don't have incentives for people to complete surveys, so this is all on their time. So I have only quantitative questions with pre-existing because I can't, and even then we still get missing data. So for me, I already know I'm going to get missing data, so I would rather make the survey as easy as possible, which means I'm going to give up the qualitative rich kind of stuff, and not even, I don't want to say that it's qualitative because I know it's not
But it's words.
It's words, right. So you got to think about that as well that's a reality. That is a reality that you will have missing data. So how you want to try to minimize the missing data that you are going to have, because you will have missing data. And one way is going to be, that's the question you're going to ask. Am I willing to give up, do I ask, is my survey just 2 qualitative questions, so it's not that demanding on them there, but then I miss all the kind of quantitative big picture kind of stuff? or do I just get the big picture, not the nuances, right?
Yeah.
That's a hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
And I felt like if I left out like the why question of like why are you choosing these methods, then like it's kind of like a boring study. Like it's a boring project. Like I wouldn't want to read it. Like I don't care how many teachers are using teachers in speech language, personnel are using one study. I want to know why they chose it, because that would inform my own practice by knowing why they, their decision making process essentially.
Yeah.
Which is why I figure like, if you limit, like I don't know, if you limit them, you can kind of like, hey, I noticed you, like kind of like pressure them, but not pressure, just like.
Yeah, I completely hear what you're saying, but it's just not the reality.
Yeah.
You cannot control how people are going to answer the surveys, right? You just can't. But what you do know is the quantitative ones are easier to fill out than the qualitative. So that is not, you just, so I hear what you're saying, and I don't agree that it wouldn't be an interesting study, because I don't know exactly how it's grounded. If the quantitative questions aren't worth asking, like if that's not interesting, then you're not asking the right questions, right? Don't ask something that you're not interested in, right? That's kind of research rule number one. If it doesn't give value, if you don't think it's valuable, then don't spend your time trying to ask questions that aren't valuable and then want me to answer questions that aren't valuable to you or to the field, right? So make sure whatever you're doing, you think it has value. But this other question of, well, the why question is really important, so that's fine, but then realize that you may only have 2 people who respond.
Yeah.
Right? 2 people versus 50 on the quantitative. So it's not, then you just, the contribution that you can make is also different, because you can't say as much about what 2 people say, so you're thinking about, well, it informs me as a practitioner, but 2 people doesn't inform your work as a practitioner. 2 people answers a very different kind of question, right? So again, there's just trade-offs. Everything is a trade-off, but these are the things you have to be aware of as you're designing your study and as you're walking into it, is what are the trade-offs I'm going to have to make? What are the decisions I have to make? What am I going to be comfortable with?
Yeah.
Am I going to be okay with giving up that house beat, blah, 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 this kind of thing. And it's hard. Nobody has the expectation that you, Talia, knows how to do this as a senior at Steinhardt. But this is why you have your mentor, to help you figure those questions out. Because again, this is why I gave you the reading that I gave you. It is possible that your honors work does make a contribution to the field, and you guys should go into it with, I really want my work. For me anyways, I felt like I don't like working on something unless I know it's for something. I don't like busy work. So if you're going to do something, make it count, and the way you make it count is by doing something that the field needs, and answering questions, that collecting data on questions on which you can answer and make a contribution, and your mentor is going to help you figure that out. Right? But this is not to be pessimistic, this is just a real concern of data collection. Particularly with survey data, people are allowed to skip questions.
And really, if all you want to know quantitatively is which method do you use, and what you're really interested is why do you use it, then maybe you do want to do a qualitative study and interview people.
Yeah.
Because your basic question does not make a survey. You know what I mean? Like, which technique do you use? I mean, you could design a survey that said which technique do you use, and you could have a whole sort of series of like reasons why they might use it. You could design that as a survey. But if what you're really interested in is like, do you use this or this, right? And then why? Then maybe it's a qualitative study.
It's just there's a lot of methods. Like there's just a lot of methods. And just maybe that's why I think I guess maybe then doing a mixed method, which is finding maybe teachers who use different methods in the schools or in the practitioners that I survey, and then interviewing the ones that use different ones, like not just like the PEC system, or they're using like Project Leap or like all these different.
So basically, you would have like a 1-question survey, and then based on that, you would select
possibly.
a pool.
That's what it's looking like now. But then maybe I want to also ask them if they've heard of the other methods, which is kind of not part of my research.
Yeah.
Which is like an interesting question. It's an
interesting question, but I don't know if it would buy you a lot. I mean, if you're just really trying to narrow down and pick, like, you want to look at why teachers you know who use these 3 different methods use them, then yeah, like one, and that's just the first pass. Like the first pass is just like who uses whatever, raise your hand. Okay, great. Now among those, I'm going to pick someone to interview. That's different, and that's not mixed methods.
Do the interviews have to be long?
We'll talk about that. We shall discuss.
You're gonna stop it?
Yeah.